Thank you, Ed. The last time I was asked to speak was fall of 2014, so I see a trend. I'll see you guys again in fall of 2018. Thanks for Ed and for inviting me and for his leadership. We're both kind of Missouri transplants, but we washed a lot of the Missouri off, so we're now Kansans. I'm actually ending my third term, and so it's a privilege to have served you for 12 years, and either nobody wanted the job or they thought I was doing a good job, no one filed against me, so I'll have another 4 years. So Ed asked me to talk about advanced voting and early voting, and you never give someone in politics kind of an open mic because I have a couple things I want to say first. I woke up kind of a little feisty this morning. Some of you have heard this already, and this is a shortened form of it. First of all, I would like to thank Nora and Noreen and Curtis for inviting me. We've now done an event in Baldwin City. We did an event out near Lecompton, which had a really good turnout. We're going to do an event in Eudora here in a couple weeks. When I was vice chair of the party, we really wanted to do outreach outside the boundaries of Lawrence, and I'm glad that we're continuing to do that. Thank you to all of you that are here today for spending your Saturday morning and listening to us and for your dedication, especially for those of you that serve as precinct committee people. When I was vice chair of the party, the hardest part of the party is recruiting, keeping, and getting active precinct committee people. So those of you that are serving as precinct committee people, you are the lifeblood of this party. All right, so I'm going to talk about a little bit about how you prepare for this election, but I want to lead in with a few things. We just passed the 50th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act. We just passed the 100th anniversary of women having full right to vote in Kansas. We were the 8th state to do that. A big one is, this is also the 45th anniversary of 18-year-olds having the right to vote. Voting rights are huge in this state. Universal suffrage was part of our conversation at the very beginning. When we brought together the Wyandotte Convention, we talked about, should we give women full right to vote? We gave women the right to vote in school elections. And then, so the 1860s, we were one of the first states to give women any right to vote. In the 1880s, we give women the right to vote in city elections. We have the first woman elected as mayor in the United States. Does anybody know who that is? I should do this for the premium. Susanna Salter from Argonia, Kansas is elected mayor. Then we have the first all-female city governments happen in Oskaloosa, Kansas, and in Baldwin City was the third in the country to have all-female. Their big thing was they did public works. They got tired of not having sidewalks, bridges, they got tired of mud in the streets, and they did public works. From the very beginning, we have been at the forefront of the fight for suffrage. But now we find ourselves kind of at the forefront of a different discussion about voter rights. And it's one that I want to talk a little bit about before we kind of talk about this election. At the base of what is going on in Kansas, and I was at a national conference a few years ago, and there was a professor speaking. She goes, I just added a slide about Kansas. You guys are fascinating. And it wasn't a good thing. Fascinating wasn't a good thing. We're at the heart of a question I thought we had solved 50 years ago. And that question is voting a right or is it a privilege? This doesn't come out whenever we talk about voter ID, when we talk about citizenship, but at the heart of this is voting a right or a privilege? If voting is a right, then it should be preserved to the same level that we protect all other rights, like the freedom of speech. In Kansas a couple years ago, we declared ourselves a constitutional carry state. We said that the Second Amendment was so sacrosanct that there should be no rule, no law which stops a person from exercising their right to bear arms. Why can't we be a constitutional vote state? A constitutional vote state which said there should be no rule, no law, and no barrier for someone to exercise their right to vote. If voting is seen as a privilege, then what that means is we bestow the privilege upon a person. That means that someone is in charge of giving you the right to vote. deciding whether you get the privilege to vote or not. And that's kind of a slippery slope. When you talk about voting as a privilege, then you talk about things like, I have a friend of mine who runs elections in Mississippi. He carries in his wallet his receipt from when he paid the poll tax to vote. That wasn't that long ago. You had to take a literacy test in order to vote. For those of you who want to, Google the Louisiana literacy test from the 1960s, not the 1890s, the 1960s, where someone had to take this test and then someone like me graded the test. And if you look it up, it's extremely subjective. Put a circle within a circle. Well, then someone like me looked at the color of your skin and said, well, that's not a real circle, so you don't get the right to vote. That's the problem we have when we talk about voting as a privilege, bestowing something upon someone as voting as a privilege. There's a couple things I want to address. First of all is, elections is the greatest view of federalism that you can find. There is no national elections authority. There is actually no state elections authority, and I want to address that. There is a myth. A lot of people think that Chris Kobach controls the rolls of this county, controls how we vote in this county, controls the elections in this county. And I'm here to tell you that by law, he has no jurisdiction within this county. The county election officer is the person in charge of the rolls. He has no access, and his staff has no access to the rolls of this county. They can't make a change, they cannot remove a voter, they can't add a voter. That happens under my jurisdiction with my office, okay? And so there's a lot of people that have called and said Chris Kobach's purging the rolls. He's not touching the rolls. And I follow the federal law. I follow the National Voting Rights Act, which tells me very strictly when a person gets removed from the rolls. There are a lot of people that think that he's in control of elections at the county level, and I want to tell you that is not true. He can offer advice, and I can ignore that advice. One of the things that you hear a lot is people say, well, there is no, and he has actually said it, there is no actual outlined right to vote in the original Constitution. And that is true. It is true that there is nothing that specifically talks about the right to vote like it does the freedom of speech and so forth. But the right to vote evolved, and it was established through many court cases. In the 1960s, this is where I thought that we had decided this. In the 1960s, there are all kinds of court cases like one person, one vote, right? That decides how big a Senate district is, how big a House of Representatives district is. That really said that it's not okay to do a poll tax. That it's not okay to have to pass a test in order to vote. A lot of you have heard me talk about this. One of my guiding things is the speech that LBJ gives on voting rights on the floor of Congress in the 1960s. How many of you have ever watched it? Google it and watch it. It's an amazing speech. And I watch it quite a bit. And one of my favorite quotes from him in there is, "Our fathers believed that if the noble view of the rights of man was to flourish, it must be rooted in democracy. The most basic right of all was the right to choose your own leaders. We must not refuse to protect the right of every American to vote in every election that he may desire to participate. This guides my actions as county clerk." But what happens is, after 2000, there's lots of talk about reform. There's some, I don't know if you remember the 2000 election. And there's a lot of talk about, we reformed things. There were a lot of things about voter ID that had not been upheld, but in 2008, Crawford versus Marion County, they upheld an Indiana voting ID case. And they said in that the integrity and reliability of the election process is acceptable to provide some level of basically discomfort for a voter if it protects the process. And that's huge. When you compare what the Supreme Court said in Westbury versus Sanders, which is one person, one vote, that no right is more precious in a free country than having a voice in your election. So voter rights cases is where we kind of end up. Voter ID. A lot of people talk about voter ID, and we'll talk about it here in a second, but one of the telling things for me about voter ID is that when the Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act under Shelby versus Holder was removed by the Supreme Court a couple of years ago, within hours, southern states had enacted voter ID. Not days, not weeks, hours. Okay? Which is part of why the Voter Rights Act, Section 5 was there. So, what you have is a lot of discussions about fraud. And I want to address fraud for a second. The discussion of fraud by politicians in elections is the ability to scare people about voting, okay? There are instances where people do try to work the system. There are people who try to work every type of system, and we put systems in place to address that. But that leads to reforms. And when fraud is talked about by those currently served in office, I kind of chuckle, because that means they won. Rarely do you see the person who won talk about fraud, right? You talk about fraud if you lose because that's the reason why you lost. If you won, okay, I took logic in college. A, if fraud is rampant in your state. B, you were elected. C, you were elected by fraud, right? Because if Democrats are using a lot of fraud, we suck at it. In 2010, we lost everything. And the rules weren't in place at that time, so our fraud machine didn't work. We use the discussion of fraud for political gain. And that really bothers me, because my job is to make sure everybody has the access, the ability to vote. My job is not to stop someone from voting. And to me, that discussion about fraud causes people to second guess whether they should participate, whether they should register, whether they should ask for a ballot. People are afraid. I will tell you, people are calling our office right now and they'll say, I need to check and register if I'm registered to vote. You look them up and you say, you've been registered to vote since 1976 in the same place. Have you moved? No. But I've been reading the news stories. I'm worried that I've been removed from the polls. That worries me. It worries me when people think they're going to be turned away because of everything that they hear. That's why you'll hear from our office, a couple years ago we tested this, but we're going to really push it lately, is the I'm Voting campaign. We're going to be rolling it out. Everything you see from our office says I'm voting. We're going to have I'm voting buttons. We're talking about having signs that say I'm voting. The underlying message of that is no matter what, I'm voting. Nothing stops me from voting. Yeah. Because the messages about voting that are coming out in this state are all negative. We're not hearing positive messages. And that frustrates me. Colorado just did an amazing experiment where they did same-day registration. They did mail ballot voting. They completely restructured their voting into what they call a voter-centric rules, which I love. They reduced their provisional ballots by 95%. They increased their turnout, right? That's what we should be doing. We shouldn't be talking about how we keep a person from the polls. We should be talking about how we get a person to the polls. Now we'll get to the part that Ed wanted me to talk about. I told you I woke up feisty. My political mentor is a woman named Bobby Lurie out of Springfield, Missouri, who Ed knows, and she was pretty feisty, and I told him this morning I woke up with Bobby Lurie talking in my ear. So. Voter registration is the biggest barrier to voting. It is especially the biggest barrier to voting for 18 to 24-year-olds. And in Kansas, we made that an even bigger barrier. And so a big thing for you to look at is the deadline to register to vote is coming up in 1 month. It is the day before advanced voting started, so October 18th. And so it's really important that you get people registered to vote. Don't worry about the citizenship portion of it. My office will handle that. You just get people registered to vote, okay? And I will accept registrations electronically. They don't have to come to my office. It doesn't have to come through the mail. I can accept it by fax, if anybody uses fax. But the big deal is a lot of people will scan it in as a PDF and send it to me as a PDF. That's great, okay? But the key is getting people registered, and then we'll handle the citizenship part. Part of the thing that Ed wanted me to talk about is the federal form voter. There are multiple layers of voters right now in the state of Kansas. What it comes from is the Supreme Court in a case said that if someone uses what's called the federal form, there's a state form and a federal form to vote, then they have the right to vote in a federal election. Because what the Constitution does say in Article 4 is that the time, place, manner of choosing is up to the states, but that Congress can have an impact on what the rules are for federal voters. And so they said you can have federal voters. Well, so for Arizona and Kansas, what that means is if you use the federal form, the state, and at the end, Justice Scalia said, now they could say nobody does state elections, but we didn't address that. And so what you deal with is, the question is, does somebody use the federal form? Do they get a federal ballot, or do they get no ballot? And that's what all these court cases are about. And then to make it really fun is there's a court case that said, if you registered the DMV, which is part of the Voter Act, did you use the federal form? Which a judge has said yes. So that added thousands of people to the federal form rolls. There are a number of court cases that are, I think, will be decided in the next couple weeks, which may swing what a federal form voter gets to do. So here's what I tell you. My office is prepared for any ruling. What we've done is we've sat down and said, what are all the possible rulings? How do we address it? I have programmed federal-only ballots. If a judge says they get a federal-only ballot, I give them a federal-only ballot. If a judge says that they need to be on the rolls and not vote provisional, which I believe is the way it should be, I am prepared for that, and I am ready to program that. So we will do everything we can to make sure we're ready for that. Your job is to get people registered to vote. Then I will need your help to get information out. The thing that really bothers me is that as each ruling comes out, it's really confusing on what a person gets and doesn't get, what kind of ballot they don't get. Register people to vote, and I will handle getting them that information. It is important that if you have changed your address, you need to re-register, okay? But even if you have not re-registered, you move down the street and so forth, you can vote a provisional ballot. If you don't have your ID, you get a provisional ballot. Your provisional ballot is your fail-safe. And I want to talk about the provisional ballot. There is a myth about the provisional ballot, that I burn it in the backyard. That I have heard this. You laugh. This has been told to me. That we only count it if it's a close race and so forth. The provisional ballot is your protection. 20 years ago, if you walked into the polling place and you weren't on the rolls, you were told, sorry. What the provisional ballot does is it captures your vote and allows me a week and a half to do the research to find out we should count that ballot. We count 85% of all provisional ballots. So even if you forgot to change your address or you don't have your voter ID, go to your polling place and vote a provisional ballot. And know that it's protected by law, federal law. And I don't want to go to Leavenworth, so I'm going to follow that law. Voter ID. Oh, on the birth certificate part. Birth certificate only applies if you are a brand new registrant in the state of Kansas. If you were registered prior to January of 2013, you don't have to show your birth certificate. We will help you get your birth certificate. So if you have someone say, I don't know where any of my information is, I don't know what to do, our office reaches out to them. We put together a birth certificate liaison. He has researched all of the ways to get birth certificate in all the different states. We will help you apply for that birth certificate. And thanks to the support of the county commissioners when I went to them, I don't think any of them are here, we will pay for that birth certificate. The biggest inequity in that law is that if you were born in Kansas, you get a free birth certificate. If you're like many of us, you were born in another state and you find Kansas as your home, you're on your own. So our job is to make sure that we take care of that inequity. So let people know that. There's also all kinds of different things you can do. One of the things that I like to talk about is I believe that there are, in my office I've been challenging people that there are barriers to voting which we don't think about. One of those is you hear Chris talk a lot about all you have to do is fill out a form. All you have to do is fill out an affidavit. What's interesting is the bureaucracy that has increased over the past couple years by small government politicians. Filling out a form for you and I may not be a big deal, but we have many people in our county for which literacy is a challenge, and filling out a form is a huge hurdle. And so we will help you fill out the form. I also love how he talks about if you don't have anything, all you need to do is call together the state election board, which is the lieutenant governor, the attorney general, and secretary of state. That's not intimidating at all. Just saying, I would like these three very important people to sit and decide whether I get the right to vote, which takes us back to what I talk about as a privilege, right? That is the definition of privilege. Three white men deciding whether you get to vote. Voter ID. We've had voter ID for a while. And here's the things I wanted to tell you about voter ID, which is there are a lot of different IDs that can be used at the polling place. If you forget your ID, go to the polling place, vote provisional. You have a week and a half to get us a copy of your ID. We will call you. We will make sure that you get your stuff to us. We were the first in the country to offer a free photo ID. We saw that there was a huge need, especially for assisted care living facilities, for people who needed ID. So we will go out there, we will take your picture, we will issue you what's called the Douglas County Voter ID. You know, the law said any government ID, I'm a government, I can issue it. So if you don't have an ID at all, I will get you an ID. And even if you don't have an ID and you vote, the law allows me to issue you that ID before we count the provisional ballots, and therefore it counts. So don't let photo ID be a barrier at all. We have removed that barrier. Advanced voting. Advanced voting starts pretty quick. I am encouraging advanced voting for many reasons. One is it allows you to skip the lines. I always worry about lines on the presidential. It allows you to kind of research and think through your ballot. The other thing is, here's the hidden secret. The campaigns and candidates know who's already voted. It takes you off the phone call list. So starting on October 19th, we will start advanced voting. In the next couple days, you will receive a mailer from me that goes to every household. It will list all of the advanced voting locations and times, but it has a really handy advanced voting application that you can tear off, fill out, send to us, either electronically or by mail, and we will send you a ballot starting October 19th. So I am sending you the way that you can advance vote by mail. I have increased your advance voting opportunities beyond the courthouse. So especially the week before the election, from 10 to 7, we will not only vote at the courthouse, we will vote at the Golf Course Superintendent's Building in West Lawrence, the Fairgrounds in East Lawrence, and the Multicultural Resource Center up on KU. Anyone can vote at any one of those locations. Walk in, vote. Kansas has no excuse advance voting, which is great, versus Missouri, which you have to have a notarized reason for. Baldwin, Eudora, and Lecompton, we will vote in those locations the 2 Saturdays prior to the election. 9 to 1 the first Saturday, 9 to 3 the Saturday after that. So you can help push advanced voting. It helps me because it helps the lines, but it also helps us get people out to vote. When we talk about get out the vote, we don't just have election day. We have 20 days that we can get people to advance vote.
If people have to vote in advance provisional ballot, when do you go through those? Is that on election day or before?
All provisional ballots are after election day. Yeah. And here's the only thing I need to tell you about advanced voting by mail. Send it early. The law says 7 p.m. on election days when I need it, and I will receive advanced ballots on Wednesday and Thursday that can't count. And I don't know how many of you know, but our mail now goes to Kansas City and then comes back. And so don't wait until Saturday or Monday to send your ballot. Send it early. You can drop off your ballot at the courthouse. There's a slot for dropping off your ballot, and you can drop it off at all the satellite locations or the Treasury satellite location. So that's listed in there, but you can just take your ballot in there. But make sure that I get it by election day.
Where's the slot?
On the south parking lot, there's this where you can put your tax receipts. You can also put it in there. We paint it brown so you can't see it. I wanted to paint it like lime green, but yes, there is a drop box right there, and we'll check it. And you can, as long as it's in there by 7 p.m. on election day, it will count. DouglasCountyElections.com is your go-to for all things elections. All the forms for advanced voting, all information on polling places. I moved polling places for 15,000 voters because of construction and stuff. So you should, if you were in that precinct that I moved, by now you're sick of hearing from me, you're going to hear from me some more. You've received a letter, now you've received 2 letters that came this week. You received 2 postcards, and there's 2 more coming. As a friend of mine called and goes, what is your mailing budget? Because I'm sick of hearing it. But I will tell you, I will still have people who will call me and go, I didn't know my polling place moved. So if you go in and put your name and your birth date, you can find your polling place, maps to your polling place, and in a couple weeks we will put up your sample ballot. So you can look at your sample ballot. There are over 130 different ballots in this county. Your ballot will look different than your neighbor's ballot. There is a constitutional amendment on this ballot. So read that and be prepared for it. But DouglasCountyElections.com is really a huge resource for you as you go along. Paul?
Is there any way like to put signs on the fence outside the construction site on election day?
We put signs at all the places that we moved from. Pinckney was a little difficult because we didn't really know where to put it, and it was a little sign. But yes, we put a sign near where kind of the entrance is.
So people who show.
Yeah, I'm hoping with Pinckney the big construction fence tells them that it may have moved. So, advanced voting, look for that mailer. Encourage people to advance vote. Get people registered to vote. You know, the biggest thing for you to know about my office is that we are doing everything we can to remove all barriers. And if we can't remove them, we at least put a ladder for them to jump over them. Because I don't know if you caught this in my speech or not, but I believe voting is a right. I don't believe it's a privilege. I don't want the ability to decide whether you get to vote or not. And so we will do everything we can. If you have any questions, contact me. There's lots of rumors and myths that happen and swirl around this election. If you hear something at the coffee shop, some of you have done this, call me and I will tell you the truth. And so thank you for all that you do. And if you have any questions, contact our office. Thank you.